Hello, welcome to Life Rhythms, Tarot, Food, and Spirit. So I'm here the second time today. I wasn't planning on doing this video today as I wasn't really quite, I don't have everything quite gathered together that I was thinking about, but I realize that tomorrow's the full moon and it's already November 3rd. And I'm really ready to wrap up my card of the month, which has been working with the archetype of death. So I wanted to make this roundup, this October roundup, before I broke down my altar. And I'm going to take a little chance here and turn the camera so that you can see the altar, and then we'll get down to the business of October roundup. And really, for me, the altar was really pulling the death cards from most of my decks, which aren't many compared to a lot of you that I've been watching. This is from the Ophidia Rosa. And then from Dark Days Tarot, and from the Oracle of Oddities, certainly one of my favorite Oracle series out there, and classic from the Thoth Tarot. Get that there. And then from the Lumina, which I'm just getting to know this deck really, but this card really hits the nail on the head, I think, for me. And then my snake totem, which if any of you follow my Instagram account, you see her with me all the time. And the smoky quartz has really been with me this month here. And these beautiful rattles from Kachina House, which they have really beautiful products, very well made at really reasonable prices. So just a few things that I have here that will be broken down this evening as I'm back again, ready to move into November. And my card for November is the High Priestess, which I'm really thrilled about. So before we move into her, well, I'm not going to talk about her now because that's November and we're just beginning. But it was interesting to receive Death as the card of the month, because I have a very different relationship with that card over the last couple of years. When I was drawing this card a lot about two and a half years ago, I was extremely resistant every time that death card came up. And I think it was because I knew that something wasn't really fully right with what was going on in my body. And it's hard to remind yourself, no matter how much you work with the cards, when these more challenging cards come up, that it's not necessarily about that thing. So death card doesn't mean death, as most of you who are watching already know that. But yet when it's something that is personal to you, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it's hard not to perhaps jump to those more surface associations. And certainly where I am now in my process of dealing with living with cancer. I This card doesn't have as much charge for me. I don't know how much my partner was comfortable with this whole altar this entire month, staring at all the skulls. But for me, it really has become much more transpersonal, about change and transformation, and what potential lies in that. And in a way, I've had to really remind myself of that, especially in these last couple of days as I'm getting ready to break this altar down. Because in the next few weeks, I'm going to be going for some tests that one is well due to keep up on if you're dealing with a situation such as mine. And I'm having a lot of resistance to having them, even though I'm feeling better now than I felt in quite a long time. And I have no reason to imagine that anything would necessarily be wrong, but one never knows. And I was thinking back this morning as I was writing in my journal to when I had tests in January and then again in June. And of course I had some anxiety or frustration around going through the process of them, but I wasn't necessarily as filled with this, I don't want to get them, I'm feeling fine, I don't see why I have to get them. Because I really realized, looking back to January and even as near as June, that I was already kind of still in a very shredded and broken down place, down to beneath the surface place. And so that if something were to be wrong at that point, I was already a bit broken, if you will. And just in the last few months that I've been starting to feel more normal and, more like Christine, the outside, the external, the ego moving into the world kind of thing. In a way, I feel like I have more to lose now than I might have felt like I had to lose in January or even in June. And these were just some impressions that I had. And a good reminder for myself, well, that number one, I'm completely human. So, of course, if I'm feeling more normal and looking more normal and in the context of things behaving and being able to do more normal things, that the possibility of that being taken away in some way feels scarier than how I was feeling 4 or 9 months ago, when I still didn't really have my hair back and I wasn't as sturdy as I am becoming now. So it's the reminder of, okay, I'm letting go of this for this process this month, but that transformation is always about, and the possibility of change is always about us in some way. And that is part of the deal with living in a human body. So there's so much that I could dig into around this, and I think that as people, we can be served well to dig into, whether we're dealing with something that directly impacts our life or not. So those are just some very outlined thoughts about this card and me and this journey this month, in that in some way it's really been crystallized as this is coming to a close. So I'm getting ready to close this. Some other things that I worked with this month were a few new decks, and I have not really had new tarot decks. I've really worked with the same deck for almost 20 years, and that was the Mother Piece deck. And then when I started dating my partner, my now fiance, and started hanging out with him, he had the Thoth deck. And that couldn't be more diametrically opposed to looking at the Mother Piece deck. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And so then that deck sort of came into my life a few years ago. And then as I started to want to formalize my understanding of the practice of reading the cards, of course I said, well, let me go to the Rider-Waite. And so about 4 years ago, the Rider-Waite came into my life, and that just kind of is there as a reference for me. Still, I haven't truly sunk my teeth into that deck because I work with the decks much more intuitively, so I haven't sunk my teeth into that deck, truth be told. But it's there. So then that might have been, that was like maybe the third deck that came around for me. And in the recent couple of years, as my life has changed so much and the nature of what my work could look like or how I could engage with people and serve people and certainly serve myself, and started to look on Instagram and explore, and now more recently on YouTube, of course the eyes get opened and big and like, wow, what's out there? So what's come into my life recently in this last month has been the Marielle deck, which is just everyone most likely, I shouldn't assume, many people have seen this deck, but it is just stunning. And I mainly focused on this deck for an Instagram challenge I did at Shadow Work October, which was a wonderful way that I felt to get connected to the community, and I really love that. And I'm actually doing 2 challenges for this month of November. So this deck is just mind-changing, really. And then the Dark Days Tarot, which is the little square deck. And this is a deck that I put out for the moon gathering, and I foresee that it will make its presence known in the moon gatherings as I continue to hold them. It's a wonderful deck for people to just pick up, and if they're not familiar with the practice of tarot at all, the images I feel are very accessible, and I put out the little white book that it comes with, and they can refer to that before we delve into getting them, people who are participating, to speak about their own impressions of what they're seeing. And it's the Dark Days Tarot. And then a deck that I was waiting for, which is really off the beaten path for me, as I'm really just kind of beginning this journey of exploring new decks and allowing those images and imagery to open up my psyche in different ways. I don't ever foresee myself being someone who has 150 or 200, or some people have 600 decks. I'm amazed by that. For me, that would be overload for my nervous system. So I'm just going about it the way that that works for my nervous system. And so these few things that I've been gathering, I want to be able to digest what's coming to me. And this is about the limit, I would say, for a little while. There are a couple that I know I'll have to show you at the end of November, but I can really already feel like, okay, this is like, I worked with one deck for almost 20 years, so having several around is already like, okay, what am I going to? But so the deck that I've been waiting and waiting for, La Courte de Cherokee, this deck is just stunning, and it is a complete digression from these more modernized decks. I feel it's a calling back to, I think, the more of the Marseille decks, that style. Just so stately and lyrical at the same time. The images are, the colors, it's just elegant. And so for a deck like this, one really needs to know the basic idea, a lineage of what a Five of Cups might be, or what a Seven of Swords might be, in order to read or work with these cards, because you're not given all this other imagery, clues, or suggestions. So it's a very different style of deck to work with, and I am working with it entirely on a personal level right now. And I am also feel very fortunate to have been able to get this deck. It almost got sent back to Bulgaria. I had a hard time getting here, so since it did make its way here, I believe it's meant to be in my hands, but not many of these decks were produced. Some under 1,000, certainly. It might be under 800 or around 800, somewhere between 500 and 800. I know that's a broad category, but so those were some decks that have come into my field in October. The rattles that I showed you, the smoky quartz, that's always been something that I've been gathering about. That's kind of one of my keystones, if you will. And then in the last year or so, Labradorite has also been a stone that has kind of come into my field of awareness, if you will. And I have some pieces that I'm not going to show really well here, but they're almost translucent, and these stones really, they suggest could be used for scrying, actually. And I will say that there are times that I'm just completely mesmerized by looking into them. So this is just a wonderful, I feel like it's at once very earthy, but also up for working with one's self-expression. So this has been something that I've been working with a lot. If you hear sizzling in the background, I believe my father's sauteing some Swiss chard. He's leaving tomorrow. Brings me to Brooklyn, to my home here, and gets me settled for a few days, and get some food made, and I get settled, and then he goes. And as I've been coming back here, just started coming back this past June after having been away for a full year, going through everything that I've been going through with the cancer that kept me away from here, and because I needed to be with my family, that kind of intensive care that I needed, and it would be very hard for my partner on his own to have helped me through that on his own. But as I've been coming back, each month I stay a little longer, so we're up to me staying about almost 3 weeks, and So it takes some planning and support of good people around me, and I'm lucky that I have that. So that also unfolded a lot more in October. I think October was really the month that I stayed here the longest so far, and it's not that easy for the people that are caregivers. So the fact that I've been getting stronger and a little bit more independent and able to make some connections the way I've been making them through this wonderful YouTube community and through the Instagram, and getting to feel for myself like touching myself again, at least in the outward way. And now it's also reminding myself to remember that the inner self is eternal and unchanging, and I got to touch that, unfortunately, in a way that I would wish that nobody had to get to touch that. And I just have to remember that if things are to change again, that I am not really going to go away, right? The I, maybe, but the essence, no, right? So this is a lot of what I've been digesting this month, and I think I will leave it at that. Could say many more things, but I don't want to ramble on anymore. So I will be back with more next week. Who knows what I'll catch everybody up with next week, whatever. Maybe there'll be some wonderful VRs to respond to, and keep up with everyone as they're posting. I'm really enjoying being a part of this community, starting to be a part of it. So until we meet again, thank you for joining me at Life Rhythms, Tarot, Food, and Spirit. Have a good evening or day wherever you are at as you're watching this. Be well.